Hey everybody, what is up? How's it going? Thank you for joining. We'll give it a minute. Thank you everybody for hopping on. What are we talking about tonight? This week we have been just going back and forth, going crazy. We passed the COVID bill, everybody. We got it. Checks are coming out. Everyone's getting $1,400. People who didn't even have money before, who didn't get checks before, are now getting checks. And it's actually not just $1,400 for a lot of you, because if you have children, for each one of your kids, you will also be getting in total up to $3,600 per child in your family. So we're going to get into that. I want to answer all the questions that you all have. What's in this bill? What was the process? This, that, and the other. You know, how I feel about, oh yeah, you guys like my haircut? You guys are talking about it? Let's not start another national crisis over it, right? It's all Republicans. So I'm so excited to talk to you all about what's in this bill, talk to you about the process on it, answer your questions, talk about yes, you know, there were a lot of fights in this bill. Did we get everything we wanted? Absolutely not. But did we get things that are going to change people's lives? Absolutely yes. And so let's talk about it. I want to break down what you all are going to expect. I believe that there are going to be millions of people that get a lot more money than they thought they were going to get. And I'm really excited about that. I want to talk to you beyond just the checks. What else is in this bill? It's a total of $1.9 trillion. And you know, I can tell you, and I really can, you know, in our last relief bill in the CARES Act last year, you know, in the legislation that had the first round of checks, there was a lot of just like corporate giveaways and just like massive corrupt stuff, because frankly, we had to deal with the Trump administration. And I can say that, you know, with confidence that this 1.9 trillion does not have anywhere near that same scope of giveaways and nasty stuff. And so that means that more of this money is going to help you. And I truly do not believe that we have had a bill that was this focused on working people in a really long time. So again, there's so much more work to be done. I can tell you about my frustrations in the path and whatever, but you know what? Let's take our wins when we can get them. And then we'll talk about the work that needs to be done. Because I think that it's okay, you know, sorry, I'm moving this a little bit. I want to make sure you guys can hear me. It's okay to say when good things happen. You know, we don't have to be a negative Nancy all the time. There's a lot of stuff that there is left to be desired that we need to build power to get. But the way that we build power is by acknowledging our achievements along the way, hype ourselves up, and then move on to continue on to the next fight. Because we got a lot of fight ahead. We have a lot of work ahead, but this is major, major. So let's talk about... can you guys hear me, by the way? I just want to make sure that, because my phone is like resting, I want to make sure that you all can hear me and that, what's it called? That the mic isn't covered up. Okay, so let's talk about what's in this bill. First things first, let's talk about the checks. We are at $1,400 for the stimulus check. There's more money in this bill. But just talking about the stimulus check, there is $1,400 per person. And guess what? And dependents are included. So many of us so many of you all, college students, adults with disabilities, so many people that deserved a stimulus check in the last few rounds, last year, and didn't get it. You're going to get it this time. So it's $1,400. And so while it's less money, it's more people are going to get it. And so we're really excited about that. And so when you add that up into your whole family, it's like thousands and thousands more dollars that your family will probably get under just the stimulus check provision alone than they did last year. So thousands more dollars on that. Really, really important. Again, I want to answer all your questions along the way, so I'm going to be looking at the chat to see if you guys have any questions. One of you all said, what's the income limit on the check? So the income limit on this check is the phase out starts at $75,000. So if you are an adult that makes $75,000 or less as an individual, as a married couple up to $150K, I believe, then you will be getting a stimulus check. Now, one thing that is different, and this was like one of those fights that I was telling you about, is that last year, and here's like the bad news, right? Here's the give up, is that last year, the phase out was if you started making under $75,000, you got the full amount of the check. And then if you made more than $75K, it started to phase out to $100,000, and then you got nothing. Now, we had conservative Democrats in the Senate that fought to lower that phase out to be just like wildly steep, from $75,000 to $80,000. So most people, if you make more than 80K, you will not be receiving a stimulus check. Now, again, this was a huge point of contention for us. We put up a really big fight to prevent this, but right now the Senate is 50-50, and this was a critical provision. However, what did we do to fight back? Because we did fight back. We didn't just take it laying down. So I came in and I helped introduce an amendment, and we played a little hardball with those conservative Democrats in the Senate, and I worked with a bunch of other House representatives. Cindy Axne really led on this provision as well. I worked with her, and what we did is that we said, okay, you know what? If you're going to try to take this away from people, which we don't agree with, what we demand is that the first $10,200 in unemployment income that people got in 2020 should be tax-free. And so we won that. So if you were on unemployment last year, and if you were on unemployment in 2020 and got up to $10,200 in unemployment, you will not get taxed on it by the federal government. And so if you already filed your 2020 taxes, let's say you wanted to qualify for a stimulus check, or for whatever reason you filed, you can readjust. I am not a tax professional. I am not a tax accountant, so I cannot tell you your specific situation, this, that, and the other. But what I can say is that you should check in with a tax, with your tax filing. And by the way, there's plenty of free services for people under a certain income threshold, so that you can, if you already filed your taxes and already paid out federal taxes on it, you can get that money back. And so that was the exchange that we did. Do I think that our party should be this conservative? No, I don't, but it is what it is right now. So we got $1,400 in stimulus checks. We included adult dependents this time. So millions more people are going to get a lot more money. So we're going to get that. Adult dependents are included. That means if you're a college student and you didn't get a stimulus check, you are now eligible for a stimulus check. So we're going to be doing that. Again, if you already filed don't worry. You can fix it. You can get it back. It's not already gone. But again, I would consult. You either reach out to a tax professional or refile, etc. I can try to get more detailed info for you, but we just signed it into law today, so you're gonna have to give me a minute on your individual scenario. The other thing that I would say is that a lot of people ask questions on, here's the other part. I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's stimulus checks. Now let's talk about child checks. What's a child check? That's a new thing that we have included in this COVID package. So if you have a baby, and by baby, I mean anybody from, if you are currently expecting a child that will be born in 2020. So everything from bun in the oven to 17 years old, you will get recurring checks this year starting 90 days from now. So the law has it that the program gets instituted 90 days from now. They need a minute to set everything up for millions of people. But so you will start getting recurring checks starting in the summertime. And between the time you start getting your recurring checks and the end of the year, you will get $3,000 per child above the age of 6 and up to the age of 17. And if you have a child 6 or under, it is $3,600. Now, that's not all going to be one lump sum payment. You're basically going to get, let's say my cousin has a 4-year-old. My cousin will basically be able to expect $300 a month up until the end of the year, about, give or take. Now, the reason there's a little bit of kind of vagueness here is that Congress basically, someone said from 2019 or 20, I'll get into like the taxes on the child check and things like that in a little bit, but basically, if someone said they're gonna have a kid now, you gotta have that kid before the end of this year, okay? So you're on a tight turnaround. But I think that the thing that's important is that, so for example, my cousin, if my cousin has a 4-year-old child, my cousin will be able to expect a check. Now, the goal, what we were trying to set up was monthly child checks. So our goal in establishing this program is starting around July-ish, give or take a month. The goal is to get parents $300 a month checks per kid every month. Now, the reason I'm adding a little bit of kind of why that's a little vague is because we couldn't prescribe it and require them to be monthly in the law, but the law does direct the IRS, like Congress is asking the IRS to do this, but we need to set up this program and we need to give a little bit of wiggle room so that they can set everything up, they can do the programs, because this money and setting up these checks, it takes real work. We have to hire the people, you need to build out the infrastructure, you need to set it up, you need to link up people's accounts. Like that takes a lot of work for hundreds of millions of people in the United States. And so we don't want to send anybody to jail if it doesn't meet the exact specification, which is why there's like a little bit of wiggle room in there. But the goal is to get you recurring payments, and people will get recurring payments that will add up at the end of the year to either $3,000 or $3,600, depending on how old your kid is. Now, a lot of parents are asking lots of different questions. What year are these taxes based off of, etc.? Largely based off of your 2020 taxes. And there are parents that have different kind of, claiming their child, like different arrangements and claiming their child on taxes. If you kind of flip-flop, one parent claims your children on taxes one year, another parent claims kids on taxes another year. That we are also giving and asking the IRS to address these issues. So they may set up a portal or a website, the way that we had set up a website last year to help you track down your stimulus checks. Or, some people where the government didn't have your information and you didn't have a check because the government didn't have your info, they're going to work on exploring setting up a portal to update information if this is like a year on year or off year on claiming a child's on your taxes. So that's what we're kind of doing there. Income limit on that is similar to the stimulus checks, except I believe this one actually has the full $75,000 to $100,000. I don't think that the child checks cut off at $80K the way the stimulus checks do. I think the phase out lasts all the way through $100K. So you may not get the full amount at $100K. I believe you get that up to, or rather under $75K, but you'll still probably get something. So really excited about that. Someone saying, my parents are on SSI. They didn't get, they did get the first check, did not get the second one. Will they be eligible for this stimulus check? The answer is yes. My wife says she wants one more kid this year. We have one 4 months ago. Well, you'll be eligible. So, for your parents on SSI, first of all, if they got the first check and they didn't get the second one, or for anyone out there who was eligible for a check last year and for whatever reason did not get it, you can get that money still, but you have to do it now when you file your 2020 taxes. When you file your 2020 taxes, you'll have the opportunity to correct for that, and they'll just add it to your refund this year. So do that, and you can do that. Someone said student loans. Let's talk about student loans, because I found something very interesting in this bill. Now, before everyone gets ahead of themselves, there is not student loan cancellation in this bill, but there is a provision that feels like an Easter egg, which I think gives us some hope, because not only are college students going to get, stimulus checks that they didn't get last year, but I noticed, and some people noticed, that there is a tax provision tucked away that says if your student loans get canceled, that cancellation, you don't have to pay taxes on that cancellation. Which, in other words, you wouldn't have to, it wouldn't be processed in as though, it would not be, if your student loans get canceled, it will not be treated as though, the government gave you money for you to pay off your loan, so that you would have to pay taxes on that. So let's say you had, several $1,000s in student loan debt, you wouldn't pay taxes on the cancellation for that. Now, there's no student debt cancellation in the bill. So this provision that's tucked in, I think, tells us, if you care about student debt cancellation, is go time for you. You need to mobilize, and now is the time to organize, to create the political pressure, because in there, tucked away, is almost like a little, someone's paving the path. And I can't claim credit for that provision. If you want, I can go into some of my specific contributions to this bill as a lawmaker. In fact, I will get into one of those a little bit later, because it's part of money that you can get, additional funds that you can get. But progressives are looking out for you. And by the way, this is the benefit of electing a movement of progressives to Congress, because when there's so few of us, if it's just, and this is the benefit, for example, of expanding the squad, because when there's just 4 of us, There's only so much we can do, right? There's only physically so many amendments that we can introduce. And people will say, why don't you do that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Because we're human beings with 24 hours in a day. And so when you elect more progressive members to Congress who are not financed by big money, who are not financed by lobbyists, when you pitch in, small dollar donations, you get people who are looking out for everyday working people. And so I didn't have the bandwidth on this because I was working on unemployment, I was working on adding adult dependents, I was working on FEMA funeral assistance, which we'll get into, but we don't have to rely on one person to do everything. We've got people that are willing, the more progressives we get, the more progress we get. And so someone was looking out and included that, which paves the way for us to fight for student loan forgiveness and not have it, hit you on the back end in terms of getting taxed on that potential forgiveness. So that is a very important update on student loans that I think is really important. And I think it's good news. I think it's good news, and it's a positive update and progress in the fight on student loans. So really excited about that. What else is in this bill? We've got $350 billion in state and local assistance. So what does that mean? That means that if your state has been cutting back services, if they are not hiring firefighters, if they stopped construction on bridges, if your school is struggling to reopen because they aren't able to make the infrastructure investments necessary, there is money here to help states not cut off their services or restart their services and not have to lay off a ton of people. There's also, on top of the state and local funding, there is even more funding specifically for schools. Of course, as we know, more funding for vaccine development, for contact tracing, like all of that, and also an expansion in the ACA. And let's talk about healthcare. Okay, so as progressives, we believe that healthcare is a human right. We're not going to stop fighting until we have Medicare for all guaranteed in the United States to every human being on our soil. That being said, there have been healthcare changes made in this bill. And I'll talk on the $15 minimum wage as well. So there have been healthcare changes to this bill. If you are on COBRA, what's COBRA? So first piece of good news. If you are on COBRA and your employer was covering your health insurance, so for people who don't know, COBRA is if you lose your job or, if you are no longer employed, COBRA is a way that you can keep your employer given health insurance when you're, after you leave your employment. It is so expensive. It's like insanely pricey for so many people. It's difficult. It's difficult to afford or to maintain. In this bill, if you have COBRA, it will be paid for. Your premium will be paid for 100% until about September. So you don't need to pay COBRA anymore. And that means you can keep your insurance virtually free of cost, which is really, really, really great. There are also, but it doesn't just stop at COBRA. If you get your health insurance off the exchange, there are really important changes that mean you will pay less money and that it will not be as expensive for you. There are provisions. If you make, I have my notes up here because there's like some numbers, thresholds, and I don't want to get them wrong for you all. So basically, this bill increases the allocations that you all get in order to better afford ACA insurance off the Obamacare exchange. So when I was a waitress, I had to go on the Obamacare website, the ACA website, And frankly, it was the state exchange, the New York State of Health. And then I go up and everything's $300 and it's super expensive and it's got an insanely expensive deductible and it's like so frustrating. What has changed here is that if you buy your insurance through the ACA, you are probably going to have a lower premium across the board that you're going to pay. And it outright eliminates the premium. You don't have to pay anything on benchmark plans for people making under 150% of the poverty level, of the stated poverty level. So I need to figure out, I'm going to try to get that income number for you. But basically, and also if you're making 400% of the federal poverty level, so about $51,000 a year, if you are making about 51,520 is the number, but roughly if you are making under $51,500 a year, you will qualify for federal help, and you will never pay more than 8.5% of, well, not never, but you will not pay more than 8.5% of your income on your premium. And that will last for 2 years. So for the next 2 years, if you get your health care off the exchange, you will not have to pay more than 8.5% of income on your premium, which is a big deal because they're really, really expensive. The federal government is also going to cover a larger share of Medicaid expenses for states that haven't expanded through the ACA. And 12 states so far have opted out of the Medicaid expansion. So let's see. Yeah. So basically it's kind of like an enticement. Right now there are 12 states that did not opt into the ACA and didn't get Medicaid expansion. What we're basically doing is giving those 12 states a second chance, and we're kind of sweetening the pot, and we are basically telling these states that don't accept the ACA and didn't do the Medicaid expansion, we're telling those states, listen, we'll give you even more money if you let your people get health care. And so because the states have to opt into it. And so it sweetens the deal, but ultimately it's up to your state. So if you're one of those 12 states that aren't part of the ACA and don't have the Medicaid expansion, talk to your local elected official, talk to your state legislature, put pressure on your governor, because that is what can help you get more health insurance covered. In New York State, where I come from and where I represent, we don't have that problem. But if you are part of one of the 12 states that haven't expanded Medicaid, you have another opportunity to do so right now. Let's see. Yeah, and the COBRA is just a huge, huge, huge deal. So we're really excited about that. What else is in this bill? Restaurants. Let's talk about restaurants. So, late last year, we expanded the PPP program. And for the first 2 weeks or so, or like the first week or 2 weeks, I have to get the exact date line of this month in March, in order to help address the issue where last year PPP was rolled out and all these powerful companies got PPP loans and all these small businesses got locked out. What we did was that we created an exclusivity window where only truly small businesses with a smaller number of employees were allowed to apply for PPP. So we basically put the mom and pops, we create an exclusivity window where mom and pops could get into PPP loans at the front of the line. And I don't know if that's still going on. If it's not still going on, then it just ended like a few days ago, or it may be lasting a few days, but that's going on right now. So yes, there's PPP, but in this bill, there's extra help for restaurants. So what does this mean? There was a proposal out there called the Restaurants Act. There are some, chunks and pieces from the Restaurants Act that were included in this. And basically it is more targeted relief to help independent bars and restaurants make up for the revenue that they lost with fewer requirements on how they spend the money, because PPP did have elevated requirements. So what this includes, among other things, is $28 billion in grants for restaurants, free money. Because we know that hospitality, restaurants, bars, venues got hit especially hard during the pandemic. And so they're on top of PPP, there's extra relief targeted to hospitality. And as someone who comes from the hospitality world, that worked in waitressing and bartending and venues, it's just, it's really close to our hearts, especially in New York City. So we're really, really excited to have that provision included in the bill. Let's see. And I think I'm looking at the rest. Childcare providers are getting some money, the way that restaurants are getting a little extra money. We've got a bunch of funding for schools to help schools reopen safely, so that teachers can get vaccinated, so that we can make any retrofits necessary, etc. So we're not, people want to talk about school reopening as though it's like a black and white issue, as though you either support schools reopening or you don't support schools reopening. I think we all want schools to reopen, but we don't want to put people at risk. And so what this allows us to do is create a path that is as safe as we can make it, to help schools reopen safely. And there's no mandate in this bill. So it's still up to your community and leadership, because you all know best. This also includes housing and rental assistance programs, $22 billion, $5 billion for homelessness aid in particular, $10 billion in mortgage payment help for a lot of people, and also $1.7 billion for Amtrak to help them largely, bring back a lot of the furloughed and laid off workers from the kind of the lowering in the frequency of train service, which is, by the way, in case you didn't know, Amtrak is part of our federal programming, and we invest in that. We also address pensions, $85 billion to guarantee worker pensions, many of which were at risk. So a lot of people who were afraid that their retirement was at risk, the guarantees for that are in this bill. So I think that's covered almost everything. And someone said unemployment. We extended unemployment. Thank you for bringing this up. How could I forget? It's one of the most important parts. Unemployment. As what was mentioned, unemployment was set to expire like 3 days from now. We have extended it, $300 every week through September, I believe. So your checks have been re-upped. Unemployment has been re-upped. $300 a week. It's going to, stay there. Really excited about that. So, there's also a 15% boost in SNAP benefits through the end of September as well. So if you're on SNAP, you're going to get 15% more. Your SNAP allocation is going to grow by 15%. There is loan assistance for farmers and ranchers who belong from groups that have faced racial or ethnic discrimination. So our Black and brown farmers are eligible for some increased loan assistance because they have to help make up for a lot of historical discrimination, particularly financial. So there's that. Someone said if you've lost your childcare and have to quit your job, do you qualify for unemployment? If you are wondering if you qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance, the federal program that we've written, I have done an entire YouTube video. It's like an hour long or something like that. I've also done it for PPP and EIDL. So what I'm going to say is hop on my YouTube channel, and I go into all of the nitty gritty very at length. And I present it. So there's that. Here's some more cash as well. This is something that I personally worked on for over a year. We got it in for 2020, but it was only for 2020. And now in this program, we've authorized it through 2021. If you are a person who lost a loved one due to COVID-19, which, as we know, disproportionately impacted frontline workers, essential workers, Black Americans, immigrants, low-income people. We know that this virus was not just evenly affecting everybody, right? We're all riding the same storm in different boats. And this impacted some communities a lot more than others. So if you lost a loved one due to the COVID-19 pandemic last year, and you incurred funeral expenses, burial expenses, any expense for putting your loved one to rest, we will pay you back up to $7,000 in expenses. Funerals are really expensive. I lost my dad when I was about 18 years old. My family couldn't afford it. And we spent years just trying to dig ourselves out of just the huge financial hole, not just from the medical bills, but even from the funeral. Like $7,000-$10,000 in expenses just hitting you overnight from something so unexpected. That's devastating. It's devastating. So this was really important to me, but also shout out to our community advocates and leaders out in Queens. Elm Corps, this whole thing started, and this is really the power of advocacy and community. This whole thing started when I had community advocates come to me at the very beginning of the pandemic. Now, if you don't know, New York City got hit early. We got hit some of the worst because it was way before we knew anything. This was before we knew what we know now about transmission. It's before we knew how bad it was, before we knew about long haulers, before we even had testing to confirm a lot of widespread testing in order to confirm what was going on. And so very early on, community advocates said, we know that this is impacting our community disproportionately. And lo and behold, this is why we listen. This is why we always listen to community organizers on the ground. I had community organizers telling me from day one, before we were even having regular case data, that this was impacting our community more than it was impacting others, even within New York City. And lo and behold, just a few short weeks later, our congressional district was proven to be the epicenter of the epicenter in the United States. At the beginning of the pandemic, our congressional district, my district, New York's 14th congressional district, covering East Bronx and Northwestern Queens, which covers Corona, Jackson Heights, Parkchester, Allerton, Pelham, all of that. Elmhurst Hospital, Jacobi Medical Center, all of it. We had, out of the top 10 zip codes in America of COVID, we had 5 of the top 10 zip codes of COVID cases and deaths were in one congressional district. That was ours. So we were the epicenter of the epicenter. So community leaders flagged this before we even had the public health data yet. They knew. They said, this is hitting us harder, and it's hitting frontline community, it's hitting frontline workers, it's hitting Black and brown folks, it's hitting essential workers way more than it is hitting anybody else. And that means that it's hitting working class people, and that means that it's going to have huge implications for the wealth gap, because you have people who are already struggling now being hit with $10,000. You know, you already have the emotional devastation of losing a loved one, and then on top of that you have the economic devastation of having to put them to rest. And so in this program, last year, I fought all of last year, and we successfully got a refund program through FEMA that if you laid a loved one to rest, we will pay that money back to you, up to $7,000. And so we got that in last December, and in this package, we got it now through 2021. So if you have lost a loved one in 2021, your funeral expenses will be eligible for reimbursement through FEMA. Now, how do you access that? What does that look like? I want you all to know, expectation-wise, FEMA is setting up the portal now. So it's been authorized. The money's been authorized. They are basically setting up the website, building up the program, doing the back end. We expect that to be able to open this spring. So we expect it to be maybe in the next month or two that will open. So the important thing is to keep your receipts, keep your documentation, almost any and all expenses related to putting your loved one to rest, which a lot of places, it was just so catastrophic, but it's horrible what people went through, but a lot of people they were charged to store the bodies of loved ones, because the funeral homes, this is what we dealt with in our community. The funeral homes were so overwhelmed with loss that they physically could not get to everyone in time. And so there was a backlog of people who had passed away, and those bodies needed to be stored. And they charged the families for that. No one should ever have to pay for that. And that is not your fault. And no individual family should have to bear the cost of a global pandemic in such a personal way. This affected all of us, and that shouldn't mean that the family who lost a loved one should be the one who's left holding the bag. And so this is on all of us to take care of you. Someone said, what constitutes a loved one? So this is a really excellent question. So the way the program works is that there is one filer per loss. So it's actually flexible. Because we know with our families, etc., you can't just define family through mom or dad or brother. Sometimes the closest people in your family are cousins. Sometimes the closest people in your family are a godparent. And so FEMA has been specifically directed to handle these cases with sensitivity. And so there are not arbitrary lines around who counts as a family and who doesn't. However, there's only one, you can't have 10 people that claim per person. There's only one reimbursement claim per loss. So my recommendation is to get your family together and identify who that person is for your loved one. You're going to have to provide documentation. You're going to have to be close enough to this person. You have to provide a death certificate. You need to provide all of your receipts, documentation, invoices, etc. And you have to be able to state your relationship. So we want to do it in a way that is flexible enough to cover everyone's situation, but we also want it to be rigorous enough to make sure that, a family isn't getting defrauded. And so it's a fine line. Someone said, what if there are multiple deaths in a family? Each death gets a reimbursement claim. So you're not limited to each family. Each case is handled individually, and each case's expenses are reimbursable and handled individually. So what I think this is pretty much, that's like the overall sweeping, analysis of the bill. If you want me to talk about the politics of it, I'm happy to talk about the politics of it. Of course, it takes a fight. We believe that this is not just about Democrats versus Republicans and just doing this ping pong back and forth, but that we believe that the Democratic Party needs to be better too. And in a package like this, it can be really frustrating because you're negotiating within your own party. So, there were things that we pushed for, that we wanted this package to go further. So how did we want this package to go further? First of all, we wanted stimulus checks to be $2,000. I believe, the argument for it being $1,400 is we gave $600 in December. We have $1,400 now, and both of those things add up to $2,000. I don't like it. I don't buy it. I know a lot of you all don't buy it, because when we say $2,000, people thought we meant $2,000. They didn't think, when we said $2,000, come on. We know that people didn't think, 14 plus the 600. 2,000, 2K is 2K. But, we don't have a magic wand. The fact is that we don't have a magic wand. And so when you have a bunch of people in the party who want 2,000, and then a bunch of people in the party who want 1,400, and the president sides with 1,400, we're going to get the 1,400. But that doesn't mean that we stopped fighting and took that line down, because even though they brought it and they said 1,400, what we pushed back with was, okay, if you're going to do that, then we need to include dependents, and we need to include adult dependents. So while we wanted it to be 2K for all, what we were able to do is that even though it was 1,400, we were able to bring a lot of people from $0 to $1,400. So that's kind of what we did there. We also, in where we're at, these checks, in our vision of the world, these checks should be recurring. I especially think they should be recurring to make up for the complete abandonment of last year. And I don't want us to just pretend that the devastation of last year didn't happen. I know Trump was president. I know that there was little we can do, but I think 2,000 recurring would have helped make up for the non-recurring and the non-payments of last year. So these were things that we wanted, and that we tried to fight for, but we weren't able to get included in the provision. But again, we were able to negotiate and save this bill from being further cut by conservative Democrats in the Senate. And here's something that's pretty crazy, is that the House, let's talk about minimum wage. So we fought for a minimum wage, a $15 minimum wage, to be included in this bill. And in fact, on my side, on the House side, in the House of Representatives, $15 minimum wage was included in the bill. Now, the problem, though, is that, as you know from Schoolhouse Rock, the bill has to pass the House, then the bill has to pass the Senate, and then it has to be signed by the president. Now, if you pass a bill in the House, but that same version, but a little bit different, gets passed in the Senate, then the House and the Senate need to meet in a process known as reconciliation. And then they have to meet together, and then they have to agree and both vote on the same exact legislative language. So what happened was that the House included a $15 minimum wage, and the Senate has a parliamentarian that ruled on something known as the Byrd Rule. And the parliamentarian said, according to the rules of the Senate, we can't include the $15 minimum wage in this reconciliation. Now, I called for Democrats to ignore the parliamentarian because you can do that. And I think we should do everything possible to pass the $15 minimum wage. So to hell with the ruling. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but just wave it away. Who cares? Include it and vote on it. What was the problem with that? The problem with that, and so our boy Bernie out in the Senate said, let's have a vote on it. And he called the Senate to the record to actually vote on moving past the parliamentarian and including $15 minimum wage in the Senate. And what happened? 8 Senate Democrats voted to not include a $15 minimum wage in the Senate bill. Now, we're very thankful to Senator Sanders for doing that, because before he did that, people were trying to fight it without going on the record. Okay? People were trying to fight the $15 minimum wage without putting their names on the fact that they were fighting against a $15 minimum wage, because that's like really how a lot of politics works. I could tell you the stories I could tell y'all about the lengths that people have gone to try to make sure that we didn't have a vote in certain procedural processes. I could tell you stories. I could tell you stories. But here's one example of that. And so those senators did not want to, I don't really think they wanted to vote and go on the record because I don't think they really wanted their states. They didn't want to do that. And so Bernie kind of triggered this procedure that forced everybody to vote on it. And we had 8 senators who voted no, 8 Democratic senators who voted to not include that. I don't have all 8 on top of us, but if you were online this week, you probably saw a Democratic senator from Arizona vote no, and everyone got really mad because of like the flourish with which they did it. But that no vote was a no on including the $15 provision. And so what that has done is that it has shown, it's shown all of us, it's, added these names, and it's shown who are those 8 people. You can look them up. There's like tweets and stuff, and I'm going to get names wrong when I'm doing it off the dome. And so I think, sorry, I'm getting it fixed. So basically I think, what's going on is that we don't want to get these people on the record. They're on the record now. And so we've got some states to work on: West Virginia, Arizona, Delaware, couple others. I don't want to say, part of me wants to say, maybe Maine, but I don't know. I don't want to say, I don't want to say a state if they're not on the list. But basically, we now have a list of people, and now that's up to you as everyday people and organizers to hit up your senator if your senator did not vote on $15 minimum wage. You can probably just Google it really quickly this week and find out what that list is. And you should absolutely 100% contact your senator and say, why did you not vote to include a $15 minimum wage? Because it's really important. But I do want you all to know that we are not giving up on that fight. We are taking this directly to the Biden administration. And, the Biden administration has said we're not giving up on a $15 minimum wage. And so then we're going to ask them, what's the plan? What's the plan? If not this, what's the plan? Because we're not letting this go. This is the longest time that we have gone in U.S. history since a $15 wage was established. This is the longest we've gone without raising the wage. So this is ridiculous. 15 is the floor. People are saying, oh, will you accept $11? Okay. Will you accept $11? Do you know when people started fighting for a $15 minimum wage? Almost 10 years ago is when this fight started. People had deemed 15 to be the living wage back then, almost 10 years ago. So when you account for increases in inflation alone, $11 is close to what $7.25 was back then. So no, I do not accept $11. I accept an actual tangible raise for working people is what we need. And by the way, $15 is the compromise. People say, oh, progressives, oh, AOC, porque you don't compromise. 15 is the compromise. Because if you took the actual minimum wage that was established several decades ago, that same minimum wage that some of these senators now, they say, oh, when I worked in, the ice cream parlor and made $6 an hour, if I could do it then, y'all can do it now. Well, $6 at the ice cream parlor before I was born, if you actually index that to increases in inflation and cost of living, or rather, and productivity gains, that would be a $24 minimum wage today. $24. So we already think it should be $24 an hour. So 15 is the compromise. That's the compromise. People need to, realize how hard it is. I just don't think a lot of my colleagues, I just don't think they get it, like how hard it is. You can't live off of a minimum wage today. Like you just can't. It's not, I don't think there's a single state in the country where anybody can afford median rent or, rent, working 40 hours on a minimum wage. And so a minimum wage should be a living wage, which means if you are making minimum wage, you should be able on 40 hours a week, not 60, not 80, not 100, not 2 jobs, not 10 jobs. One job should be enough. One job, 40 hours a week, minimum wage. You should be able to feed yourself, pay your rent, be able to go to the doctor, take some time off. And that's what minimum wage should be. That's not too much to ask. And we have been conditioned. This is like just that dystopian capitalist conditioning that you don't deserve to live if you make minimum wage. That is wrong. All life has dignity. And for everyone who likes to think they're pro-life, they should maybe support policies that support life when you are working 40 hours a week on a job, or just support life, period, But I'm kind of over this hypocrisy. So anyways, if you're pro-life, why don't you support universal health care, guaranteed health care, living wage, et cetera, down the line. So someone copy pasted the list right there. So you can scroll up. Thank you for whoever did that. And follow up with your senator. Say, hey, what's up? $15 minimum wage. This is part of the Democratic Party platform. Where are you at? Talk to them. Because one of the excuses that I hear people hide behind the most is, oh, no, I'm not getting any calls about this. No one is calling my office about this. I'm not kidding you. Like, a lot of people think this whole call your senator thing is BS and doesn't mean anything. I'm telling you right now, it is so influential. It's influential precisely because not enough people do it. And so when someone does call, it's like, whoa. And so call your senator, because very often they do say that. They'll say, oh, I'm not getting any calls on minimum wage, so my state doesn't care about this issue as much. Or I will tell you, the right wing does make a lot of phone calls. Oh my gosh. I usually know what Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity or any one of these like Fox News goals were. How do you pronounce that? Anyways, ASL. Not ASL. ASL. You know, I often can tell what their monologue was, if we're getting attacked by Fox News, I can often tell what the monologue was the night before, because they send so many vicious people calling us, repeating the same exact phrases. And so what happens is that you get all of these people who are kind of like really brainwashed by a lot of these like tele-racists and just like kind of saying these lies on Fox. And then what happens is that they call our office and literally repeat phrases from the monologue from the night before. And it happens like so often, it's kind of like drones. It's really kind of weird. But it goes to show, but it, you know, it's influential. It is. I'm not even going to lie. It's influential. That's why they do it. That's why people pay so much money to do it. That's why the propaganda is effective. And so I'm telling you that you need to call your senator. You need to call your elected official. You gotta do it because they will use your silence as acceptance. I see it happen all the time. I'm telling you firsthand. As a member of Congress, I hear you all the time. I'm telling you, I hear all the time people say, oh, I don't need to support minimum wage, Medicare for all, Green New Deal. I don't need immigration reform, DACA, whatever. I don't need to support it because I don't get calls on it. My district doesn't call me about that. And so I'm telling you, you need to call. The other thing too is that calling is really not just about, it's not just about haranguing people who don't agree with you on your issue. It's not about like nagging your elected official either. Please call your elected officials who you think are doing a good job. No, not just me, but call your rep. Your rep. If I'm not your rep, we'll take the call. We will always take nice things. But call your rep too, because it let me tell you why it helps. It's not just like self-congratulatory or anything like that, but it legitimately helps me prioritize, right? Because at any given moment, we need to fight for so many things. We need to fight for student loan forgiveness. We need to fight for a Green New Deal. We need to fight for, you know, our indigenous and Black and immigrant brothers and sisters. We need to fight for laborers. We need to fight for the right to unionize. We need to fight for all of these things. There's so much positive change that we need to make in the world. And so your calls help me prioritize, because ultimately there's so much beautiful change to make in the world. But at the end of the day, my job, my core, strip away all the functioning, strip away everything. My core job is to represent and serve the people of New York's 14th Congressional District. And so I need to prioritize based on the conversations I'm having with my community. And if the less conversations my community is having with me, the less phone calls that my community is having with me, the less information I have to help me prioritize. And very often I think to myself, I'm like, okay, we have all these 10 issues. What am I going to plan for March? Am I going to do housing? or am I going to do housing in March and then environment in April? It helps you really prioritize. And so call your member, send an email. You can send an email too if you don't like the phone. And also know that no matter what, the person who's often picking up the phone when you first call is an ordinary person. Oftentimes they're quite young. You could have a 19 or 20-year-old intern picking up the phone. You could have someone in their 20s. You could have someone in their 30s, someone that's new to the work. But you're having a community liaison answer the phone for you. Their job is to be kind and to listen to you. So, don't be intimidated at all. They will help you walk through it. Please call. And if you think that your representative is doing something good, thank them. Thank them. Like, we get beat up a lot in this work, and feeling like here's like the flip side. You take a lot of knocks. It takes a lot of energy to take a lot of stances, especially progressive stances. And it is hard when you're under a lot of pressure, sometimes within your own party, to not take a stance, right? And if you feel like your community doesn't care, and if you feel like, like I'm using all of this political capital, I'm taking this huge political risk, and is it like, should I even bother because my community doesn't even notice? Maybe I can back off on this issue, and then maybe I can lean into a different issue. And so having your constituents notice is really meaningful. I can give you an example from this week. This week we took some time to stand up. I delivered a speech on the floor. So our congressional district, New York 14, again, it covers Jackson Heights, Sunnyside, Woodside, and then all the way out into the Bronx as well. We're home to one of the largest Tibetan diasporas in the world. And so this week I took some time to speak to the needs and honor our Tibetan community on the floor of the House. I did it because I felt like it was the right thing to do, but we got a lot of emails this week from people in our Tibetan community who saw it and said, this was my first time feeling this seen in Congress by a member of Congress, and thank you for this, and I really appreciate that. And it's not an ego thing, but it's good to know when your work is helping people. It's good to know that the work is having a positive impact on people. And the only real way that we can know that is when our constituents tell us. Because we want to spend our energy and our time doing the things that touch people's lives. And so when you call us to even leave a positive note and to say, hey, I noticed you voted on this thing, and I just want to call and say thank you. Bloop, hang up, 2-minute conversation means the world to us on our side, because then what happens in my office is that we say, oh, we got 5 calls on people thanking us for holding out and fighting for healthcare this week. Or we got 10 calls for people asking us, when are we going to have a student loan forgiveness vote? Or we got X many calls on rent and what we're going to do on protecting people from evictions. That helps us. That's the feedback that we need to help make decisions and where we're going to continue putting our energy, where we need to put more energy, maybe we can put less energy. So call people up. And we also have we really do have really incredible public servants in Congress, just epic people like Barbara Lee. Give her flowers, call her office, say thank you for fighting for us. It's a good thing to do. and it goes back both ways. And again, it's not about ego or anything like that, but we need to be there for each other. And for all of you all that are out there that are organizing in communities, talking to your families, doing whatever small things that you want, I want to thank you. So that thank and that gratitude goes right back. And I think that's a good note to wrap up on. Let's celebrate. Big news. A lot of you guys, by the way, can expect these checks, stimulus checks, to hit your bank account as early as this weekend. So as early as this weekend and early next week, we can expect to see your bank accounts get that cash. So thank you all so much. My thoughts are with you. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. Oh, by the way, Biden just announced tonight, every single adult in the U.S. will be eligible for a vaccine starting May 1st. May 1st. Every single adult in this country will be eligible. So there are good things happening, and we can fight for more. We got to fight for student loan forgiveness. We got to fight to pass the PRO Act in the Senate. We got to, fight for more just foreign policy. That is an area where I think our party, we're not cutting it right now. We're not doing a good job right now. We need to push to make that better. So, just thank you all so much. Please get vaccinated when you can so that we can all have a nice July 4th party, watch some fireworks together, do that thing. And then maybe by Christmas, if we can all get vaccinated, we can have small gatherings by July 4th. And then who knows, maybe by Christmas, we can have big Christmas parties and go caroling together. Who knows? Or whatever holiday you celebrate. So we will sing and enjoy Festivus. So thank you all so much. So appreciate it. I will try to save this live so that you can get some of the details on the bill in here, rewatch it whenever you want. And that's it. Good evening. Bye-bye.